Hey folks, it's Chris with The Human Project. I'm excited for this episode because we're going to talk about diversity. We're going to talk about the danger of constantly being in this echo chamber and only listening to people that are similar to us. Where's the beauty? What did God intend to go beyond that? So take a listen to this episode. Let us know what you think. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Chris.
How's it going?
Swell. I think I've already said swell in an episode before. Maybe I should pick a different word today.
Probably have. You said, well, I think for most of our salutations, we've got them covered at this point.
Salutations.
Yeah.
I'm aight. How about that?
Aight. Sure.
Sure.
Let's go with that. Aight is a little bit diverse from what we've done in the past.
It is. It's, yeah.
So speaking of diversity, look at that segue.
Wow. So impressive.
You ran across an article that was from Barna, I believe, talking about how evangelicals, we tend to make friends with people that are very similar to us.
Right. Which I think is a general human tendency for the most part.
It's comfort factor.
Right. Very, very much a comfort factor. Barna does a lot of research around Christians, evangelicals, and so on. And they found it was especially true for evangelicals. We tend to run in circles, be in community with people who are very similar to us. And there's some logic to this. I understand that it's comfort, first of all. Second of all, we tend to become like those we hang around, right? So that there's logic in that. There's also a potential danger in this as well.
Sure.
And in light of our kind of theme here of how did God design us, I think there's some part of that isn't necessarily how God designed us. To be also. So I found that really interesting and just thought it would be a good topic for us to explore a little bit and see what could be healthy. How could we get closer to God's design on that?
Yeah, I love that, because I think if we think of God's design, like look around the world, there's so many differences in people from age, social status, race, beliefs, political affiliation. All of these things are big differences that we have. But Barna's study for evangelicals had that it was like 80%, 85%?
Yeah. It was actually, it like shocked me.
Yeah.
It was extremely high. And I think it feels to me like that's an unhealthy level, but that's just my assessment of it. So I thought it'd be good to explore a little bit here. What does that mean for us, and how can we rebalance a bit?
Yeah. So I think it's safe to say God designed us for diversity.
Yeah. That's how I look at the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Literally, as you were saying. Yeah.
Which I just want to acknowledge, two white dudes talking about this, both trainers, white collar backgrounds, et cetera, et cetera. So take that for
sprinkle a healthy dose of irony here if you want to.
All right.
I also think it's fair to say we're both trying to learn from this ourselves. You can see that actively happening while we're doing this. So that's one thing that caught my curiosity, why I thought it would be good to talk about.
Yeah. So what's the danger in lack of diversity? And when I say diversity, I'm not just talking about the typical things that we would think of like protected statuses, diversity, but diversity of thought, diversity of opinions, perspectives, all of that stuff. So widening the range of what we talk about with diversity. Yeah. What's the danger in not having that?
I think if we surround ourselves with people who have the same perspectives, viewpoints, all the things that you just listed off, we end up in what many people would call an echo chamber. Where what we say is just agreed with. We kind of get a bunch of yeses and all of that perspective there. It's the same. We're not going to learn and grow from that. We're just going to keep going in the same direction.
Yeah.
And
sorry, the funny thing came up as you were talking about that. An example of this is, do you remember American Idol?
Yeah.
What made some of those episodes really, really funny with American Idol is you'd have people come onto that thought they were the best singer in the world.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my goodness, this is the most embarrassing thing I think I've ever seen. Because they never got diversity of opinions.
Right.
They would just get everybody affirming them the entire time. Oh yeah, you're great. You're wonderful. This is absolutely great. And then poor Simon Cowell had to be the bearer of
You
bad
feel
news to
sorry
them.
for Simon Cowell? That's the first.
I don't know if I would really say.
I couldn't actually watch the early episodes
Yeah, they were
of each
painful.
season because they were extremely painful and embarrassing. Yeah.
But I think it's just an indicator of what it looks like for us when we're constantly in this echo chamber and never hear a diversity of opinions.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
sorry. I wanted to bring that up as an example.
That is a painful, clear example of that, certainly. Yeah, so I think we're in danger of not understanding ourselves. We can just start there.
Yeah.
Let's start with the what's in it for me kind of perspective here. I don't understand myself if I'm just around people who are similar to me. And let me use an example from language, which might seem a little bit orthogonal to this.
Word nerd alert.
Yeah. But I have never learned so much about English as I did when I was learning Spanish.
Okay.
That our good friends from Argentina, as we were learning Spanish from them, they would tell us, well, this is what this means. And I'm like, that's a ridiculous phrase. It literally means this, and you're saying it as that. And they're like, no. So, as an English speaker, I don't think you're allowed to throw stones in that regard. And they'd point out like 10 examples easily in English. And I'm like, wow, I never thought of those before. I just say them, and even more, that's a humorous example, but even how words are put together. I understood English better by understanding another language. It's very much like that for me, and a different example of working with people who have different perspectives, different motivations. I'm extremely detail-oriented. I know it's surprising to you, Chris, but FYI, I'm very detail-oriented.
Really?
And I like to plan ahead, and I don't like to repeat things that, kind of, if you will, repeat mistakes or once I've discovered something, I want to be able to not rediscover it, but retain it. Yeah. And I've worked with people who don't have those perspectives. And my first reaction is that's bad.
More like a judgment.
Like, how could you not remember that detail? Or how could you not learn from that? And you want to go rediscover it again every time? It's easy. It was really easy for me to look at those things as bad.
Yeah.
And
just because they were different.
Just because they were different.
Yeah.
But the more that I work with a variety of people, the more I'm realizing that's difference. Certainly, I see value in my detail orientation, for example, and I'm able now to see value in the freedom that they have to not be detail oriented about everything to the level that I am. There's a nice interplay there where I'm like, I'm not trying to throw away, what I find valuable, and I'm learning that working with people who are different, man, that actually produces better results. And I can learn from that and find the situations where I go, maybe I let go of that detail orientation for this part right here because I can see the benefit. I would never have had that perspective if I just hung out with people and collaborated with people who were just like me.
Yeah. There's definitely the collaboration aspect. Like we talk about it a lot when we work with teams and organizations, is the first thing we try and do when we meet new people is find similarities.
Yeah.
And that's natural because there's safety that's there, there's comfort that's there. We like to see similarities that we have with other people. A lot of people stay there though.
Yeah.
And therefore relationships stay just surface level. What teams inevitably have when they're working together on the same goal or mission or whatever is they'll find differences.
Yes.
We've experienced this working together.
Yeah, we're both once or twice. Yeah.
We're both white dudes, but beyond that, that's probably about the only similarities that we have. Because the way that we approach things is completely different, and so it's resulted in struggles sometimes,
indeed,
and lack of respect even sometimes, because my way is right, your way is wrong, and vice versa.
Right.
But once we've gotten past that and being able to see things from the other person's perspective, also known as storming, seeing where the differences are, there's things to acknowledge where you get the best parts of both. And I think that's true in any relationship, in any community. Yeah. And that enables you to continue down the path of effective relationships, effective working together. And that's where strength comes into play.
Yes.
That's where diversity can be a big differentiator and helpful.
So you end up going from, it seems like a weakness in that storming phase, where it seems like a weakness because we're looking at it different, to it can become your strength. And as a team going forward, that you're able to kind of weave those together in a way that's much, much stronger. Yeah.
Or any relationship too. Like there's a reason the honeymoon phase is called that, because like when you get married, like you've been dating and pursuing and all of these things, and you're like, oh, we're kind of stuck together. And yeah, it was really interesting for Victoria and I, because I felt like our honeymoon phase lasted like a year, 2 years, probably 2 years. Like it was great. And then we started our business, which is crazy. I don't know why we did that 2 years into our marriage. I must be a glutton for punishment. But man, there was so much storming that happened and how we approach things differently. And there was a lot of struggle in that time. But once we started to realize like how we do things differently, like not just in that, but it came more into our just marriage life in general. Like we had so much more respect for how we handle each other. And it's become super helpful for parenting. Like we both have very different philosophies on some things. Yeah. And just seeing like not going right or wrong in that, but looking at the different mental models and the different experiences and the different backgrounds that all of us have coming into that helps make relationships go beyond just that surface level to a lot more depth.
Yeah. You can see the differences. You can talk about them, be explicit about them, find the way forward together. Yeah.
So how do we go from what the challenge or the current reality that Barna laid out of most of us have communities that are very homogenous?
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Oh, yeah. Word nerd. Awesome.
Yeah. What does that word mean?
The same.
The same. Okay.
The same.
Mike, I think there's a word tangential here. Mark's gonna know this word better than I do.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious answer is the obvious answer. Get outside of your bubble. And it doesn't have to be gigantic ways at all. I'll give you an example. Like I started several years ago starting to listen to and read news articles from sources that were from a different perspective politically than what I agree with. I did it intentionally. I did it when I felt like I could handle it, right? Because I could choose when to do that, when I was less likely to flood. And that was very simple. It was low risk. I could stop doing it at any point, right? And it really helped me. It helped me see the bias in what I agreed with, but the bias in the sources that I was agreeing with, so that I didn't even realize this, in a sense, like the glasses that I was wearing when I was looking at that. And it also helped me understand, differing perspectives and viewpoints. Not that I agreed with a lot of them, but that's a very simple example. In a relationship, I would say just start very small conversations with people that are different than you. What about that person who's checking you out at the grocery store? Like, go for the lane where someone is different than you, right? For me, the young female with orange hair. I mean, like, I barely have any hair. I just turned 50, right?
Your hair does look a little bit orange today.
Yeah, thanks, I guess.
I don't know.
Well, just strike up a conversation. It's low risk, and just see what that perspective is, all the way to, I remember one of the eye-opening moments for me of late is somebody who showed up at one of our church services who was struggling to be able to have a place to live. What we might commonly term homeless. I'm just like, that's an identity statement. I'm trying not to use it that way. But he was struggling with that. That's far from my world, right? That is far from the people that I hang out with. That's not a situation that I'm that familiar with, really. And I chose to lean into that. And wow, I have learned a lot. And I respect the gentleman that I met there greatly for how hard he is working to get out of that hole. And it's very different than my world. Like, find those opportunities, lean into them in small ways and increasing ways. It's very, very, very simple step in my view.
Yeah, those are excellent. I think of one on top of that is we tend to approach things a lot with judgment instead of curiosity. And like either like labeling something as good or bad right off the bat, instead of trying to understand or being curious or seeking like more knowledge about that thing, as opposed to just parking it in a mental model that fits in. So letting it struggle, letting it seep in, and kind of evaluating that more as we go.
Right.
I think that's helpful. Like holding things more with an open hand is probably a better way of articulating that.
There's another practice that I love. It was very different between me and Christine, my wife. And that is, I love to visit other churches, unlike not every week, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but I love to visit other churches because every time I do, I come away with two things. Something that at least one thing I'm grateful for our current church body about that I see is not in that church, and some other way I see God at work that isn't happening in our current church body. And I'm reminded that God's bigger than my experience every week in my church body.
Yeah.
That's not, again, not good, bad judgment in that. It's just recognizing, oh, God works in different ways than what I see every week. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'm reminded of back in my theater days when I was traveling with a traveling drama group. We would go and perform plays at churches. And one church that we went to, it was somewhere in Virginia. And we go, and the church building was like a barn. And the church was on the second floor of this barn. And we go, and we're going to perform this play that we had come up with. And we're all sitting in the front row, like the pastor's going to come up and making announcements. And we hear, bum 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 da da da, and it was super, like, the group that I was with was super conservative, like can't wear jeans conservative.
Okay.
Like, oh my goodness, we'll talk about that in a future episode. But man,
fun.
it was very different than where I'm at now, and the church there was very, very different, and some of the people like had never experienced something like that. Like, there was one person who was just absolutely shocked. She's like, so you can't play rock music in church, like that conservative.
Yeah.
And the person sitting next to him was like, it's okay. I think they love Jesus too.
Right.
And just like little circumstances like that, like just a reminder of getting outside of our perspective. There is so much wonderful diversity. In fact, a couple months ago, we got to host some students from Africa,
Yes,
from Kenya and Rwanda, and it was so cool. Just I'm gonna check up on this. They went through a series of classes that we have, and then we were just singing and celebrating, and our families were there. This was before we had Grace, so I was holding Sophia, and she was just loving it because they were playing the drums and singing in their native language. And just had a little picture of like, this is, I think, is what heaven is going to be like. All of us singing and worshiping and praising, like in our own language, background, etc. Like, that's the commonality that we have is Jesus. Like, all of the other things like matter so little in the long run.
Yeah.
But there is so much depth to be explored and richness beyond what we're experiencing today.
I really like that perspective. It seems like when we are in our echo chamber, or when we are in a homogeneous environment, the grains of sand, the troubles that we have seem like they're magnified many times. And when we see outside the perspective, like you're describing, like, oh, we could look at any of the differences that you just described in that scenario and be like, oh my gosh, different language. I don't understand what they're singing.
Yeah.
That beat isn't something I'm familiar with. Why are they dancing that way? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You know, they were wearing their traditional garb from their countries as well.
Yeah.
And instead, it helped you see what was actually the commonality, what is actually supreme amongst that.
Yeah.
Is Jesus.
Yeah.
And that we are all loving him, seeking after him, and worshiping him in this diversity of perspective, in this diversity of expression of doing that. And it elevates what's most important, which means that actually those other challenges that we've got seem to diminish. Not that they are they don't have any importance, but instead they are put in context.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful part of seeing a broader perspective.
Yeah. I think there's so much of that we tend to pay attention to what's different with other people and not look at where do we have similarities. And so what we're asking and encouraging you to do is look at the similarities and embrace the differences.
Yeah.
And there's beauty to be had there. So leverage that, get outside of your echo chamber. I think that's the why behind this,
Right.
and experience something different.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thanks for exploring that with me, my friend.
Good times. Let's go do it.
Yeah. So if this sounded interesting to you, you have other ideas for topics, email us at info@humanproject.us. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Behind the mics, you've got myself, Chris Conlin, and Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We are a crowdfunded nonprofit. Most of what we do is free because of your generous support. Thank you for joining us in our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to fullness in God's design. To support us financially or to learn more, visit humanproject.us. We'll see you next episode.